Thank you. Great. So I am Hannah Mitchell. I'm the program director for Solar United Neighbors of Texas, and I'm joined here by Fernando and Joshua, and they are community partners with the city, as well as Eco El Paso and Sunrise El Paso. So we're going to get started with the presentation and do some introductions, and we can just get going with the next slide. Great. So I think many people are familiar with video conferencing platforms these days. I'm very new to WebEx, but if you have any questions about audio or you're having any issues, please put a question in the chat. You can also raise your hand and we can unmute you. And letting y'all know again that this webinar is being recorded. So we're going to do some introductions. I'm then going to start the presentation in the solar technology, and then we'll go on to solar economics and how our solar co-ops work. So start kicking off these introductions. I'm going to turn it over to Joshua Simmons with Sunrise and Eco El Paso to talk about our community partner organizations and the work that they're doing right in El Paso.
All right, good afternoon, early evening to everybody, and thank you for joining us. My name is Joshua Simmons. I am both a member of Sunrise El Paso, like Hannah had mentioned, and also a board member for Eco El Paso. So I'll be covering both organizations. Firstly, I'll talk about Sunrise El Paso. Sunrise El Paso started in 2019. It is a youth-led environmental activist group. One slide too far. And they originally started with the climate strike, and then from there evolved to organize against the sale of El Paso Electric, and have also been present at the TCEQ hearings, which there will be one later on this month. So look to us if you would like to get involved in that. But has been an advocate for the community, and has recently undergone the fight with Newman 6. And a lot of what we are now gearing up and using some of the advantages we got from that battle, we're pushing the climate charter, which is a charter amendment, and that would institute climate policy through the city charter. And we also partnered with the city on this solar co-op because we believe that energy independence, along it's just shared viewpoint everybody in this coalition, that energy affordability and to also combat the rising energy rates that we're seeing from our monopoly, El Paso Electric. So without further ado, you have the information here on the screen. Please follow us on all the social medias. There's links to our email, our website, and our link tree. And connect with us. We'd love to have more volunteers and get you more involved with the community. So I'll be switching hats now. Again, my name is Joshua Simmons, and I am also, we'll go to the next slide. I am also with Eco El Paso. So recently you may have caught an article where Eco El Paso donated trees along with the Downtown Lions Club, and we planted those trees on the Escalante Park. So as being our most popular effort, we're also kind of, putting, where we can and pushing the positive campaigns, and this is one of them. So the Solar Co-op is one of the ones that we partnered up with them. We started in 2009. Became a 501c3, recognized 501c3 then, but we were started by volunteers and still run by volunteers. So all of our actions are all people who have full-time jobs, families, and they do all these efforts in their free time. So if you like what you're seeing and you've heard a lot of buzz recently, we would love to have you come and be a volunteer. And so we're focused on sustainability here in the Desert Southwest. So that means from urban gardening to adaptive changes to our transportation, electrification, hence the Electric Auto Rio Grande Association. We're also the founding chapter for that here. We are very strong and passionate about a very swift and adaptive transition to renewable energy, and that includes solar. And so localized solar development, that energy independence that you'll get by being a part of this campaign and going through with an installation, will put you in a better position in the long term. And in referencing to the article that came out earlier today in the El Paso Times, a lot of that savings is more beneficial here because we are, we're the Sun City. We're the 10th sunniest city in the planet, and this resource is so abundant that to transition to renewable energy, um, tomorrow, it should have been done years ago. But this is a benefit that we can really, take advantage of, and this is where this campaign leads into. So, without any further ado, I'll hand it back to Hannah, and she can go into details about further what this campaign is and all the details. Thank you.
Thanks so much. So at Solar United Neighbors, we are also a 501c3 nonprofit, and we're a national organization that focuses on helping people go solar, join together, and fight for their energy rights. And we really see this as a mutually reinforcing cycle. We can go on to the next slide. I'll also add that we are unaffiliated with any product or vendor. We are installer neutral. We just hope to make it easier for people to access solar options and go solar. A little bit of history about the organization. We were founded back in 2007 when our now executive director, Anya Schoolman, fielded a request from her son and his best friend who were in middle school at the time. And they just seen a documentary and they came home and they were like, Mom, we need to put solar panels on the roof. And so she started looking into it, and there wasn't a ton of consumer facing information, and it was expensive, and there were tax credits. And she said to them, if we're going to figure out how to do this, we might as well take the whole neighborhood with us, and then maybe we can get a better price on the panels and the labor and the installation, and learn about the process together. And so they started the Mount Pleasant Solar Cooperative in a neighborhood in Washington, D.C. And since then, we have gone on to become a national organization with staff on the ground in about a dozen states. You can go on to the next slide. And so here's just a snapshot of our national impact. And on the next slide, you can see our Texas impact. We started operations in Texas at the very end of 2018, and we have run about 10 other bulk purchase programs for solar. We call them solar co-ops, and I'm going to be getting into the details of how solar technology works and the solar co-op process works very shortly. Before I do that, I do want to flag that, as I mentioned before, part of our theory of change is addressing barriers to solar, and there are inequities in our current energy system, and that much of our energy infrastructure and polluting energy infrastructure is located in lower income communities and communities of color. And at Sun, part of our policy priorities are removing barriers to access to solar on both the local, state, and federal levels. So I'm going to get into the solar technology piece, and while I do that, if there are questions that come up, feel free to put them in the chat, and Vincent Yurkovich with Sun will be monitoring the chat, and he can answer questions that y'all have. If there's something that needs to be clarified, we can also do verbal questions at the end. How do solar panels work? We're going to be talking about solar PV, or solar photovoltaics, and they take the energy, the light from the sun, and transform it into usable electricity that you can use in your home. And this right here is a simplified cross section of a solar panel. The really important components here are the solar cells that are made of silicon, and they are sandwiched in between the glass and the metal. And these individual panels, or solar modules, when they are wired together, form a solar array. So you might be thinking, okay, how do these, like, where do they go? And many solar systems are installed on rooftops through a system of racking, and this racking attaches at the rafters and is waterproofed with flashing to shed water at the connection point. This obviously is an asphalt shingle roof. Uh, if you go to the next slide, you can also see that solar can be installed on standing seam metal roofs, and they're attached with clips at those standing metal seams. Or of course, you can have a ground mount. These aren't very common for our urban co-ops, but they are more common in rural areas where folks have land available to put an array on the ground. Another important component of the solar system are the inverters. So the inverter is going to transform the electricity from the panels from direct current electricity into alternating current electricity. And you have a couple of different options here. You don't need to know right now, oh, I want a string inverter or I want a microinverter, but these are the types of system components that you would see in a proposal from an installer. So the string inverters, I'm just going to talk a little bit. No, you're good. I'll talk a little bit more about the different inverter types. So the advantage of a string inverter, it's great if you have a simple system where the modules are all in one array or maybe two arrays. The microinverters are going to pop onto the back of a module, and so they're going to invert the electricity on a module basis, whereas the string inverter is going to do it on more of an array basis. And so they're good if you have shading. I don't believe shading is usually a concern for folks in El Paso, but those are inverter options, and some things that we see installers using, I guess, more and more frequently if they want to blend a string inverter. And the capabilities of string inverter and a microinverter are the string inverters with optimizers. The next important component of your solar system is the electrical panel, and many home electrical panels are compatible with a solar array and won't need any upgrades. If you have an older home, then sometimes an electrical service upgrade is required. And the costs for those that I usually see are in the $1,000 to $2,000 range if you need a full electrical service upgrade. Um, Finally, some important terminology are kilowatts and kilowatt hours. So a kilowatt is a unit of power, and it is how a solar system is measured. So if you're shopping around for light bulbs, you're going to look at, 60 watt, 100 watt, 75 watt light bulbs. A kilowatt is 1,000 watts, and that is how a solar system is sized. A kilowatt hour is a unit of energy. I'm sure y'all see these units on your utility bills, and a single kilowatt of solar is going to produce a range of kilowatt hours of electricity, depending on a variety of factors, but one of the most important factors is latitude. And as Josh has mentioned, a kilowatt of solar in El Paso has just a really great power production factor, and it produces way more electricity than it does in, say, more northern latitudes. And an average system size that we see for our co-ops is around 6 to 7 kilowatts. Might be a little bit smaller in El Paso, again, because the solar is just so efficient. On to the next slide. So to review the different components that we've gone over, we have the individual modules or solar panels. They are attached to the roof through a racking system, and the light from the sun is going to hit the solar panels and generate an electric current. So that electric current is going to flow off of your panels in the form of direct current electricity. That inverter is going to invert or convert the electricity into alternating current electricity, which is what's used in your home. And your home, whatever electricity demand you have within your home at the time the electricity is being produced, your home's going to use that electricity first. So it's going to flow through your electricity panel, be used in your home, and any excess electricity is going to flow out through your utility meter and go onto the grid to be used by your neighbors. And so at this point, folks are probably thinking, okay, well, am I going to be using all of the electricity that my system is producing? And so another way to think about this is how your system's production aligns with your electricity usage patterns. And generally speaking, if you're away from your home at some point during the day, your daily solar production is going to follow the sun's patterns on both a daily and a monthly basis. And so that is where this concept of net metering comes into play. And so net metering is a policy concept. By law, utilities have to allow for the bidirectional flow of electricity. But how they credit you for that electricity is decided at the state level. And so in Texas, we don't have a statewide net metering bill, which says in a true net metered scenario, you get credit for that excess generation at the same rate that you're buying it from the grid. However, within El Paso Electric, you do receive some bill credit. And so I'll get into that in a minute, but this is just to demonstrate that you're going to be needing some electricity from the grid at some point during the day, and you will likely be sending some electricity to the grid at some point during the day, just based on how your home uses electricity and what the sun patterns are in your area. And so now I'm going to go on to the next slide. So what could your electric bill look like? So this is a real example. Thanks to Josh and Eco El Paso, this is an example of one of their members who had solar installed in 2021. And so the most important things here is that there are two different meter reads. So the first meter read is how much electricity was consumed from the grid. And then the second meter read is how much electricity was sent to the grid. And so the difference between those two is 380 kilowatt hours. And the rate at which this person is earning credit for this excess generation is at almost 3 cents per kilowatt hour. And so this 380 kilowatt hours times this rate is where you get this $11.02. The other thing I'm going to draw your attention to, which I know has gotten a lot of attention, and might be a little bit of confusion about it, is the $30 minimum bill. So you can see on most customer bills, there's an $8.25 charge. If you're a solar customer, there is an additional charge to meet $30. And then if you have any excess if you have any excess generation that your system is producing over the course of a month, you will be credited for that excess generation at a rate that varies based on the time of year, but it is, so in this example, it's at almost 3 cents per kilowatt hour. I believe it can vary from about a cent and a half to 3 cents per kilowatt hour, and you can use those credits to bring down the $30 bill minimum. So this person's bill for the month is $17.95. However, energy that you consume in your home at the time that your system is producing electricity is automatically worth the retail rate of that electricity. Um, so with this snapshot, I'm going to move on to the next slide. All right, so you've seen the system components and how it interacts with your utility bill. So what makes a roof good for solar? And the three different things that we look for are orientation, so anywhere from due east to due west, little to no shading over the course of the day. Some shading is okay, but anything, a building or something that obstructs your panels is going to reduce the amount of sunlight they're exposed to and electricity they can produce. And then you want approximately 200 contiguous square feet, ideally, to put the panels on. Um, a, I guess a final component that is absolutely optional, but a lot of folks have been interested in, especially recently, is backup power in the form of batteries. So a common misconception for folks who are looking into solar is they're thinking, oh, well, you know, if I get panels on my roof, then if the grid goes down, I'll still have electricity. Um, and that is not the case because there is it's required that the system will automatically turn off, and that's to prevent any backfeeding of electricity onto the grid that might harm line workers. So if you're interested in having backup power for emergencies, batteries are something to consider. And if you can go to the next slide. So batteries are good if you have frequent outages and you really want to make sure that you have consistent access to electricity. I will say that the cost of battery storage has not come down nearly as quickly as the cost of solar PV. So if you are hoping that battery storage will have, you know, an economic return on your investment, that's generally not the case. And if you're interested in learning more about storage, we have a full guide to storage with some common questions and considerations, and Vincent will drop it in the chat so that you can check that out. And here is just a snapshot of what you could consider to power with a battery bank. You don't need to have battery backup that will maintain every single circuit in your home, but if you wanted to include batteries, you could start with, you know, a single battery bank and sort of pick and choose what you would like to power within your home. And you can go on to the next slide. Great. So I am going to dive right into some frequently asked questions. And if there are other questions that you think of that I don't cover here, please do put them in the chat, or as I mentioned at the end, you can raise your hand and we'll unmute you. So folks are frequently wondering, okay, what do the warranties look like? And so a solar system is going to come with 3 different warranties. The first is a power production guarantee, and that is issued by the manufacturer. And that guarantees that your system will continue producing electricity for what we commonly see as an 80% power production guarantee by year 25. So your system will be warranted to produce 80% of its nameplate value for 25 years. So systems usually degrade a little bit, become a little bit less efficient over time. But that's not to say that it's going to stop producing electricity at 25 years, but that's generally the length of the warranty. Another Another warranty that we see is a product warranty, and that again is issued by the manufacturer. And there are product warranties for the modules as well as the inverters. And then the third warranty is the labor guarantee. It's usually wrapped into the roof penetration guarantee, and the length of time for those is anywhere from 2 to 25 years. It really depends on what the installer would like to guarantee. Homeowners insurance. So we do recommend that people let their homeowners insurance know that they are installing solar, and that will allow them to wrap the solar installation into their policy. This shouldn't increase your premiums by much. In some very rare instances, we have heard people say it made their homeowners insurance payments go down a little bit if the company had a commitment to sustainability. If your homeowners insurance goes up by much, we suggest that you shop around for different options. So what about maintenance? In general, a solar system is very low maintenance. It has no moving parts. It's not like an internal combustion engine, so there isn't wear and tear on the system. Some common things that might require attending to are any dust or pollen that accumulates on the panels if there isn't a regular rain pattern. That can affect the how much electricity your system can produce if there's a really thick layer of buildup on them. And so, we hear of folks hosing them down with a garden hose. We never recommend that you get up onto the roof to inspect your panels, but there are plenty of companies that will do some simple maintenance. But overall, very, very, very low maintenance. How long do systems last? So as I mentioned when I was going over the warranties, generally speaking, we think of solar as at least a 25-year investment. There are there are stories of solar panels that have been around since the 90s or maybe before then that are still producing electricity. But in general, the warranties are around 25 years. Will my HOA allow solar? So in Texas, we have a property code and then a further piece of legislation to clarify the property code that essentially prevents HOAs from outright telling you that you cannot install solar. It also prevents HOAs from dictating where on your roof you install the solar. If a different location from, say, an optimal location reduces how much electricity your system produces by more than 10%. And Vincent can drop in the chat a link to our Texas HOA guide. We also have a HOA action guide if you are having trouble with your HOA. We've helped a lot of people sort of navigate those processes. And if you are in an historic district, it usually requires some extra permitting, but we can sort of cross that bridge when we come to it. It doesn't necessarily mean that you can't install solar. I'm just going to pause and see. I don't think we've had any extra questions. I'll pause and see if there are things that people have been sitting on.
Just raise your hand and we can unmute you.
All right. I guess hearing none, I'm going to go on to the next part of this presentation, the solar economics piece. So the cost of solar has dropped really dramatically, especially in the past 10 years. And we're seeing that, it's more and more commonplace, and these price decreases are really to do with just all the leaps and bounds and technological developments. Go on to the next slide. If you are breaking down the cost of solar, as you can see, the hard costs, so the system components, the cost of the system components has really dropped dramatically. What hasn't come down very much, and in some instances has gone up a little bit, are soft costs associated with solar companies being able to find people who are interested in solar. So the marketing costs and the outreach costs and the labor costs haven't come down. And so part of the value of the co-op is that by having an educated and activated and interested group of solar customers, Solar United Neighbors can help solar companies save on their costs, which they can then translate and transfer down to co-op members, so that co-op members can save more on their installations. Another important component of solar economics is the federal investment tax credit. It is set at 26% for systems that are placed, for solar systems that are placed in service in 2022. And while we are not tax advisors, the tax credit works by reducing the amount of money you pay in taxes, and so you file it when you file your taxes. If people have really specific tax questions, we generally suggest that they talk to a tax advisor. But the important point here is that this tax credit is stepping down. So it's stepping down to 22% in 2023, and it's actually set to expire in 2024 unless there is action at the federal level to renew this tax credit. So here we are looking at some example pricing, and the exact pricing is obviously going to depend on the I guess the company that the group selects. But if you are looking at a cost of $2.75 per watt, and you take that 275 and you multiply it by 5,000, which is 5,000 watts or 5 kilowatts, you're looking at a system cost of $13,000. And then, of course, if you double that for a system that's twice as big, that's $27,500. That is not to say that you can only get a system that is 5 kilowatts or 10 kilowatts. You could get a system that is smaller or anywhere in between, or perhaps even bigger, but that's just to give you sort of a sense of some ranges. And then you subtract the 26% federal tax credit for a net cost in the 5 kW situation of around $10,000. And then we've done these savings calculations based on the knowledge that you can't really bring your bill down much below about $30 per month. Hopefully, that policy could be reviewed in the future, but we're doing these calculations based on what is available right now, and an assumption that the cost of electricity is going to go up about 2% per year. And so we're looking at a simple payback in the 10 to 15 year range, with a net profit for the lifetime of this system of $13,588. And now we're going to go on to the next slide, and we're looking at an example scenario. No, we're going to stay on the financing scenario. So back one more. Go back. There we go. Here is what some payments could look like in a system that you finance. The previous slide was a cash payment. And so there's a bunch of different financing options. I really encourage folks to check out our page on financing that Vincent will drop in the chat. There's a bunch of different options, from classic bank loans to installer-based financing. Many installers offer a financing product. Solar United Neighbors also has a partnership with 2 credit unions that specialize in clean energy finance. So there's the Clean Energy Credit Union and the Community First Credit Union. And there's sort of advantages and disadvantages to these different types of loans. Frequently, if you want to say, for example, you would like to spread your payments out over 25 years, the installer-based financing usually has that option, and it has a very low interest rate, but you're going to be paying for your system for a very long time. Whereas some folks want to pay that off sooner. They would like to take a loan, for example, and to a bridge loan to get the tax credit. And so they might get a credit union loan that will have a higher interest rate, but they pay off the loan sooner. And so even in these situations, you see we have our scenarios for how much you might expect to save over the lifetime of your system. I do want to draw attention to the fact that how much you use electricity and when you use electricity also matters. So as I mentioned before, because of the $30 bill minimum and that you don't get you get a different rate on your bill for excess generation. It's not the retail rate that you're buying from the grid. Anything that you're self-consuming is automatically worth more than that excess generation. And because of this $30 minimum bill, there are diminishing returns between getting a solar system with 100% offset versus one with a 75% offset. Also, if your home consumes a relatively higher amount of electricity, you're probably going to see a faster payback than a home that uses less electricity. And just so, for example, at the top end of the chart here, this 16,000 kilowatt hour per year energy usage at 100% offset is going to have roughly an 11.1 year payback, and a 75% offset is going to have a 10.9 year payback. So not a lot of difference there. Whereas if you are using less electricity, so in this example, 6,000 kilowatt hours per year, you have a 15.3 year payback. And in the 75% offset example, it's a 16.7 year payback. I'm going to cruise on to the next slide. But the thing I'll leave you with is you don't need to offset 100% of your electricity consumption. You can always start small and decide that you would like to add on panels at a later time if that's something that you'll think you'll want to do. So as I mentioned before, we have a whole page on financing, and Vincent put that in the chat. And I think I already mentioned all of these different financing options. We can go on to the next slide. So how are solar co-ops work? So the benefit of a solar co-op is to leverage the numbers of a group to get a great price on a quality solar installation and learn from one another, as well as the solar expertise of Solar United Neighbors. So this is a snapshot of how the co-op process works. The first step is learning about the solar co-op. So congrats to everyone who's here. You've already checked that off. The next step is to sign up for the co-op. So if you haven't yet become a member, Vincent will drop in the chat where you can sign up to join. And then we like to spread the word. We have been spreading the word, and we are actually at the point of releasing an RFP, a request for proposals, to solar installers. And so very soon the group will be selecting the installer to serve the solar co-op. And so we got this out a little bit ahead of schedule, and we're excited that the group will be making that decision very soon. Um, we of course we like to continue to grow the group as much as possible. So please do tell your friends, family members, neighbors, anyone you think is interested in learning more about solar to join the co-op. The last day to join the group is June 30th. So anytime between now and June 30th, your friends and family members can sign up on the website. Um, Once the solar installer has been selected by the group, the co-op members will get an individual proposal using the group rate and the all of the same sort of options for equipment that is being offered to the group. And at that point, individual co-op members can decide to either sign that contract and move forward with an installation, or they can say, you know what, this has been informative, not for me, not the right time, and there's no harm done. Um, Once these installations take place, we like to celebrate that at the end with some sort of celebration. The full process from start to from when we announce the co-op is being launched through when installations are complete usually takes about 8 months. And we're going to go on to the next slide. All right, so what's next? Please go ahead and join the co-op if anything that I've said is interesting to you, and tell your friends and family members about it. If you're already a member of the co-op, please encourage your neighbors to join. And I also wanted to put in a plug. So Josh mentioned that Eco El Paso and Sunrise El Paso are collecting signatures for the climate charter. Sun has a national campaign for 30 million solar homes. And you can check out we can go on to the next slide. This is designed to bring solar to 1 in 4 homes and really improve energy equity outcomes. And so if you're interested in learning more, check out 30millionsolarhomes.org. And I think that's it. So we can take more questions that have popped into the chat, and we can let folks unmute if people want to say anything verbally. So let's see. All right, lots of great activity in the chat. Are there things that folks would like to ask? You can go ahead and raise your hand. I'd be happy to answer. Perhaps there are no more questions. If you think of questions, you can always email texasteam@solarunitedneighbors.org. I have a hard time believing there's 0 questions, but maybe they all got answered in the chat.
I think we have a question there. I don't know if we've responded, Hannah, but from Joe Nevares. No, from Charles Farley.
Okay.
To me, to the host. So I guess you all don't see it.
Oh, okay.
So why only one installer selected? From what I read on the website, it looks like there would be multiple installers and we would select.
Yeah, so our co-ops I always select a single installer to serve the group. And the reason for that is if we were to have multiple installers, there can be some confusion as to what is being installed and who's working with which installer. The idea behind having one installer to serve the group is that they can know that they have to procure equipment for a large group of people. So again, they can make those equipment predictions, and we have the advantage of economies of scale to help bring down those costs for materials. And that's just that is generally how our co-ops work, as a single installer to serve the whole group. It looks like we might have another hand. Oh, do you have the ability to unmute, Fernando?
Yes, I do. Who wants to speak?
I think it's Joe Navarez.
Okay, wait a second, Joe. I think you can speak now. We can hear you, I think.
Hi, thank you very much. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I like the information you gave us. The question I have is, in the RFP process, when you all are trying to get the best price for everybody, does it include things like where the panels are made? Because I've been doing some research, and they say, well, the American made panels are better than the Chinese made, for example. Do we include that in the RFP? Do we look at that as something that whether or not we choose who the best person is to go with to put these solar panels in?
Yeah, so we ask for things like the type of modules that the company is using, and we ask for specification sheets for all of the equipment that they're proposing. And so, as you named, there are a couple of options for panels that are made in the United States. Mission Solar out of San Antonio is one that comes to mind. I will just note that the module manufacturing, I guess, industry is very global. So, even for say modules that are made in one country, they might have components that come from a different country. Um, and it is a very, I guess, globalized industry, but if specific parts of the equipment are really important to the group, you can check that you're, say, looking for, you can check those equipment, I guess, equipment components as being something that's important to you. When you're signing up for the co-op, you can also note that you're interested in a local solar installing company. There isn't necessarily a place to indicate that you want panels that are USA made. But as I mentioned, it is kind of a global industry. And I'm actually going to tap Vincent and see if he has anything else to add to that, since Vincent reviews many, 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 many bids from installers on a regular basis.
Yeah, thanks, Hannah. There are probably like 4 or 5 large, relatively large manufacturers in the United States, and the Texas installers that we've worked with in the past all pretty much offer Mission Solar as part of their product offering, because it's based in San Antonio. Helene is in Minnesota. Silfab is in Washington State. So when we do review the bids, all of the country of origins for the modules will be listed alongside other pertinent information like the power capacity of the module and the warranty information. So we can certainly have that discussion.
And I'll just make a plug: if you're interested in serving on the selection committee, you can indicate that when you sign up for the co-op. Or if you already signed up, you can also drop me a note.
I have another question from Sandra Million. Can a maintenance clause be included in the contract?
Sandra, do you want to explain that a little bit more?
Let me
Maybe we can unmute you.
Give me a second. Sandra, you can speak now if you want.
Oh, hi. Yes, I was wondering about the maintenance clause because you mentioned there is often a lot of sand on it. And on the modules and living in El Paso with all the sand here, I was wondering, and hardly any rain, I was wondering if a maintenance clause could be included in a contract that the installer come around, I don't know, every 2-3 months, go on the roof and then clean out the solar panels.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So there, oh, sorry, I'm getting a pretty bad echo. Maybe you could mute. So there isn't necessarily a lot of, I wasn't saying it's not that like necessarily need a lot of cleaning, but that can occasionally be something that comes up. In terms of those individual maintenance clauses that are added to a contract, I don't see why that I don't see why you couldn't request that, but I don't think that's something that we commonly see. And Sun doesn't usually get involved in sort of the individual things that you are going to add onto your contract. Vincent, I don't know, do you want to chime in at all in terms of maintenance? We usually sort of suggest that people work with a company if they're very concerned about maintenance, but it doesn't come up that frequently.
Yeah, I can take a stab at that. So typically, maintenance clauses are in the types of contracts where you don't own the system directly. So those would be forms of third-party ownership, like a solar lease or a power purchase agreement, where you're not paying them up front, but you're paying them over time. So the installer has a really vested interest in recuperating that investment, which means making sure that your system is constantly working its best. Installers now, however, who are just selling cash or finance systems as a form of ownership. A really popular product that we've seen in the market recently is something called Solar Insure. And it's a third-party warranty that offers active monitoring. They cover parts and labor. It's a 30-year warranty, and it's also transferable to additional homeowners. That has been a really popular addition that we've seen recently to a lot of installers' bids, but we don't ask for any revisions or insertions into their standard contract language as part of the co-op process.
Other questions?
I don't see any other questions, Hannah.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time this evening. I look forward to continuing to talk with y'all and work with y'all. If you are interested in joining the co-op and you haven't done so, please check out solarunitedneighbors.org/El Paso. And if you have other questions that you remember after that or come up after this conversation this evening, please feel free to drop us a line at texasteam@solarunitedneighbors.org. And Vincent and myself are two of the people that regularly monitor that inbox, and we'll get back to you. All right. Thanks so much, everyone. I hope you have a good rest of your evening and take care.
Thank you. Good evening.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.